You're listening to episode number 12.
Welcome to the Inner Singer Podcast, providing tools and techniques to strengthen your inner singer, your beliefs, your confidence, your mindset. And now, your host for the Inner Singer Podcast, Mike Goodrich.
Well, hey there, everybody. It's Mike Goodrich here. Thanks for listening again to the Inner Singer Podcast, episode number 12. 12 used to be a really great number for me when I was a kid. I had number 12 on my baseball uniform because it was half of number 24, which was Willie Mays, which was my favorite baseball player. Totally dating myself. Who's heard of Willie Mays out there? Well, he was amazing. Amazing. And I was so happy to have number 12, and here we are at podcast number 12 already. I can't believe it. Anyway, let's take off today with talking about something that you may or may not be aware of, kind of fun to know about it, and that's what I would call your vocal thermostat. And we all know what a thermostat is, and some of you may have heard me talk about this before, but it never hurts to hear it again, and there are a lot of people, I'm sure, that have never heard me talk about it before. So anyway, the vocal thermostat. What is a thermostat? A thermostat is what we call a cybernetic mechanism. And there was a book years ago called Psycho-Cybernetics, as a matter of fact. My dad read that years and years ago. But anyway, I digress. The cybernetic mechanism is one that keeps things where they're supposed to be. Let's say like the thermostat. Let's say out here in California, where we rarely, in Southern California, turn on the heat. But when we do, let's say we put it on 72, and let's say it's about 60. So we put it on 72 degrees, and when the heater comes on, when it gets to 72 degrees, it goes off. So that is the ceiling. 72 degrees that you set is the ceiling. That's where you set the mechanism, cybernetic mechanism, the thermostat. So this kind of relates to our singing. How? Well, I'll tell you how. First of all, let's talk about money, just for fun. Everybody likes to have lots of money, right? I'm sure there are many people that think, wow, having lots of money would be amazing. I'm one that thinks that as well. Makes things a little more convenient, buys you a few more options maybe. But then why do 85% of lottery winners lose their money, their winnings, within 3 years of having won the lottery? And then when interviewed, they say winning the lottery is one of the worst things that ever happened to them. So why in the world would that be? And what in the world does that have to do with singing? Well, I always or often talk about finances because there's a lot of research being done in neuroscience on the brain, obviously, and its relationship to success and finances, making money. And so it's been discovered, of course, that we have, some of us, a financial thermostat or a glass ceiling that once we hit that particular amount of money, per year, per month, however it is set, that's about as good as we do until we recalibrate that mechanism. So if we're calibrated at 100 grand a year, that's about all we'll hit until we learn how to recalibrate that mechanism and raise our financial thermostat. So let's say, how does that relate to singing? Well, let's say our singing thermostat is set at being only so good. Now, remember, even though consciously we want to be really good, we want to have a great voice, great high notes, tons of fun singing, love our voice, great vibrato, great style, everything that goes with great singing. That's what we want, right? Well, let's just say on an unconscious level, our vocal thermostat or our singing thermostat is set considerably lower than that. Now, how might that happen? Well, any number of ways. It could happen by our own conditioning. It could happen by conditioning from, well-meaning parents, not so well-meaning parents, friends, family, teachers. It doesn't matter. It's what we begin to believe on an unconscious level about our voice. And that begins to set our vocal thermostat. I've seen this so often. I've seen it in myself, and I've seen it with students. And I had to become very aware of this, and I really didn't know what it was at the time. This is years ago. But I remember having a couple of students in particular. Now, they were both men, but it's also happened with women. And these fellas came in, and they didn't have much awareness of their potential. Let's say that. They really didn't have the awareness of the kind of voice that they have and the potential that they had. One in particular, well, actually, let's say both. Really, they were very similar. Let's say both were pulling up their chest voice pretty high. One guy was pulling it up to about a G, A flat, and A, yelling and losing his voice halfway through shows. The other wasn't pulling up as badly, but he was letting go into a really over-released, weak coordination. So I really worked with these guys, and it really didn't take long. I mean, one guy only had one lesson, quite frankly. The other came a few times. But I learned something very valuable from my experience with them, and I'll tell you my experience. It was as follows. Running them through a series of exercises and freeing up their voice, I was able to get both of them singing up to B flat, B natural, C, really strong, but free. Both with very spinny, consistent vibratos. One guy was just unbelievable, and he was just a kid. He'd just done a show at UCLA, and he was losing his voice every single night because he was pulling chest voice up so high, and he didn't know how to access his mix or his head voice. So anyway, he was doing this, so he came in, and we worked him, had an hour lesson, and by about midway, he was popping off B flats that were enviable. I was thinking, gosh, I wish I could do that. This kid's unbelievable. Well, he'd never done that. And, to this day, I don't even know if he realized what he was doing or if he liked it, but they were phenomenal sounds. They were going to be his ticket to some kind of a career. And the interesting thing is, I never understood whether or not he got that, whether he knew, whether he recognized it, and he never came back. The other fella, the same thing. He came back a few times, but he never utilized that part of his voice. He never owned it. He really never took ownership of it, and he never used it. And there you go. So, I remember telling my wife, gee, maybe I'm working too fast with these guys. I mean, I get all excited, and I see what's going on, and I can guide them into these areas of their voice. But I said to her, and I was really trying to think of what would benefit the student, what would benefit people. Am I, in other words, what am I doing? Am I doing this for me, or am I doing it for the student? And I really questioned myself. I really thought, am I just doing this so I can kind of feel this ego feeling of, wow, I can really get these people to new vocal heights so fast. Am I just kind of falling into that? And I thought for a second, I kind of think that there is maybe a little bit of that in there. I think for the most part, I just really get excited when I'm working with a singer and things are really hopping and working. So I really think that like 99% of it was just me getting excited. And, maybe there was like 1% of it that was like thinking, ooh, wow, I'm so wonderful. And that's okay, whatever. We all like to think that once in a while, right? But anyway, I really had to give that thought and say, should I just work slower? Should I let and I didn't know this at the time, but now I do. Now I can see this. Should I let their financial thermostat or their vocal thermostat get used to raising a little more gradually? Because if I take them into areas of their voice that they're completely unfamiliar with, on their internal map of reality, they have no road that goes to being able to sing like that. They don't recognize it, they don't appreciate it, they don't get it, and they can't find it on their own. Am I doing this too soon? Should we go at a gradual pace over a little bit of time so they begin to get excited rather than going from 0 to 60 in 5 seconds or 2 seconds or whatever it is? It's kind of like, a guy who becomes a famous movie star overnight, has tons of money, can't handle the success, and drinks or takes drugs. And it really is the same thing. I mean, it's the same thing. The same thermostat is set. This is our success thermostat. And gosh, I can certainly identify with that. It would be very, very weird and disorienting to all of a sudden be overnight Everybody knows you when you go out for lunch or dinner. You've got a ton of money that you never had before. You don't even know what to do with it. Everybody wants something from you. That's got to be kind of weird. Just as it must be kind of strange for somebody to walk in, have only pulled chest to a G or an A flat, and all of a sudden, within the course of 20 minutes, they're singing high B flats, B's, and C's, and sounding unbelievable. That's got to be a little weird. So, anyway, I have since taken a little easy on that and been a little bit more sensitive, I think, to where a student is, rather than trying, so hard just to get them from 0 to 60 in 2 seconds. But anyway, that is your vocal thermostat. So if you have a vocal thermostat that is set lower than your conscious goals are set, your your vocal thermostat, forgive me, your vocal thermostat, I guess we'll talk about money later, I don't know. Your vocal thermostat will win. Just like the heater kicks off at 72 degrees, you will kick off at some point in your vocal progress by either stopping your practice, deciding that it's not important to do this anymore. Maybe you don't like it as much as you thought you did. Oh, I really don't need to get that good. And you will tell yourself what one of my old mentors said about rationalizing. He said, you'll begin to rationalize why your old behavior is better. And he said rationalizing is telling yourself rational lies, which I think is great. And that's exactly what we do, because if you consciously set, let's say, an intention or a goal to practice an hour a day, and you start getting a lot better, and you start getting higher than your vocal thermostat is set, you will on some level begin to feel uncomfortable because it is unfamiliar territory. And even though it's desirable to your conscious brain, your unconscious brain, where your vocal thermostat is set, is saying, no, this is new territory, this is dangerous, we better go back to our old behavior as fast as we can. And, that's a little bit of a simplistic explanation, but it's pretty much what happens. So how do we recalibrate this vocal thermostat of ours? Well, one thing we can begin to do is understand where it's set. And as we've said before, it's set with your unconscious conditioning. So as we become aware of this unconscious conditioning, we can shed some light on it. We can bring awareness to it. And we can know that, wow, that's just a part of me that's afraid to be better for whatever reason. And if I dig a little deeper, like I give you a framework in one of the podcasts, a 5-step framework, if you begin to dig deeper and question, you'll discover what your vocal thermostat is set at. You can really see that by looking at your results right now and seeing what's going on. And you can begin to recalibrate it by doing what we did, let's say, in the last podcast where we talked about mental rehearsal and the mirror neurons. And you can create in your mind and in your imagination the voice that you want. And you can begin in your imagination having the vocal experiences that you want. And as we talked about in the last podcast, when you do that, your brain actually thinks you're having that experience. So you begin to gently recalibrate that vocal thermostat to accept more success, more vocal success, better high notes, better vibrato, more confidence. And you can do that all in your imagination, just like an actor playing a role. At the same time, you're doing the physical work of the vocalizations and the singing and all the exercises and all the things that we know will benefit you. But they're only going to benefit you in as much as you can accept them with your unconscious programming. So let's get our unconscious programming to match up and sync and be congruent with what we actually want, with our conscious intentions. And we can do that through mental rehearsal and practicing in our imagination. Because take advantage of the fact that the brain doesn't know the difference between real and imagined, just like we talked about in the previous podcast. And go ahead and implement that, work that, have fun with it, and let's raise our vocal thermostats. Okay? And maybe our financial ones in the bargain. Couldn't resist. Okay, so have fun with this, and I'll look forward to talking to you in the next podcast. Okay, now, bye. Thank you for listening to the Inner Singer Podcast. And please share this with all of your singing friends. And head on over to iTunes and subscribe. And if you found it of value, give us a nice rating. Thanks so much.